Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what is up? Welcome in Wednesday episode of GC Live. Lots going on, as you know. Thanks for bearing with us. Trying to get all of our content up as South Carolina lands their third commitment of the day. A 3 commitment as far as public guys. Wednesday really spanned the last 24 hours, starting last night with South Carolina coach Shane Beamer putting out a couple welcome homes. Then added a third today. All 3 are now public, with South Carolina landing Braden Lee here right before we started recording / went on air. And then, of course, Kelvin Hunter, the 4-star defensive back from right here in state, and Mike Williams, big offensive lineman from Flowers High. Both Braden and Mike, teammates up there and former teammates of Des Umeozulu. Chris, man, this thing just keeps on rolling. We're going to get into the guys individually. You know, let's start big picture. This thing is kind of come in waves. It seems like there'll be a little lull, and then it seems like that momentum starts kicking up again. South Carolina obviously landing Josiah Thompson on Friday, and now 3 guys this week.
Yeah, and the Thompson commitment on the heels of getting Blake Franks, and of course on the offensive line front, that was after landing Cam Pringle, right? So you're right. It has come in waves in terms of just, you know, a commit here, a couple commitments on the heels of each other, 3 today, which I think is the biggest single number we've seen lately, Wes. But I think you tweeted this out earlier that the recruiting momentum is real. It is a real thing, and it's certainly real and tangible in Columbia right now. They've got this thing rolling pretty good. You look at the team rankings. We need to get an update one more time to make sure this is correct. But I think South Carolina now sits, yes, they sit at 5th nationally in the On3 team recruiting rankings, and that's even after the addition of Braden Lee. Before this wave, they were number 7, which was already pretty solid. And West, they have one of the highest, I think this is important. This isn't just volume, right? Because On3's team rankings formula is a little bit different than some others. This is really dependent on quality, too, of the class. So they have one of the highest, you know, average star ranking, average score in terms of how you rank the players in the country. I think before Lee committed, they were top 5 nationally. I think Alabama had the number 1 in that metric. So you look at the blue chip ratio, you look at who South Carolina is beating on these guys, you look at where they're rated, the offer list. This is a really, really good group so far for Shane Beamer. And I think it's really interesting, Wes, to look back on some of our early conversations. The first few months, the first year or two after Shane Beamer was hired, what did we hear a lot of in terms of all of our recruiting conversations? One of the things that we consistently heard was, hey, you know, there's going to be this guy in this class, this guy in this class. This is how things are going. But people always pointed to that 2024 class in terms of sources that we spoke to about recruiting as, hey, that has a chance to be a really potentially special class. And the hay's not fully in the barn yet, right? This is a class that's probably realistically, it may not even be half done when you look at high school guys, but maybe close to it. And what you see is that it's really, really impressive so far. Again, the blue chip ratio, who they're beating. And then you get excited if you're a South Carolina fan, I think, not only by the guys you've landed, but by some of the guys that remain out there that are priorities too, that you're heavily in the game with. So all the efforts that have been building towards this 2024 class, I think you're starting to see them in motion now, and you're starting to see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah, and they've just kept on moving forward. It gives you an idea of how, you know, you have to keep adding guys too if you're going to stay in that top 5 range. Because Chris, they had actually broken into the top 5 on Friday with Josiah, and it just goes to show you how fluid it is. others, and it's not that your guys are dropping back, it's that other schools are adding prospects as well. So they had fallen out of top 5, then get right back into it, obviously, with this trio today. 2 of the 3 pretty highly recruited guys as 4 stars. Mike Williams, as we're going to talk about when we talk about Big Mike. Don't let that 3-star kind of shape your opinion of him. I think this is still actually a really, really good pickup as well. They're closing on guys too, Chris. You look at the number of out-of-state prospects that have major offers. These are not even late risers that you just did a great job with. These are true, you go out, big time offer list and just win the battle. And this DMV area, sometimes we talk about pipelines and it's more, it's kind of more in theory. It's like physics. Like this is kind of something that could happen, but is it reality? And it doesn't always play out that way. This group going into the DMV and just now landing so many guys up there and putting themselves in a great spot with Dylan Stewart. Man, I don't even know if the most super positive, like highly energized Gamecock fan could have predicted that it would go this well for these last couple of classes in the DMV area.
Yeah, I do think that's a great point. I love the physics reference. Bonus points to you for working that in, because I like to use physics references sometimes. It is when you might have these preconceived notions of a recruiting staff and maybe what they should do, right? Like I even look back at a couple of the previous tenures at South Carolina, like Steve Spurrier, right? Obviously, they ended up recruiting extremely well and had a lot of success at South Carolina. It wasn't early, though. I think a notion that a lot of people had is, hey, Steve Spurrier is coming to South Carolina. He's going to sign every top quarterback. All the receivers are going to be lining up. You kind of think that. Is that reality? Not always. Will Muschamp, some of the guys that he brought on his coaching staff, where they came from, some of the recruits they landed in the past, you just expect, okay, they're just going to automatically replicate that at South Carolina. Not always the case. One thing we've seen with Shane Beamer is that some of these notions that you thought, hey, they're going to get involved in the Northeast, they're going to tap into the DMV, into Virginia, we've seen that come to fruition. We've seen him starting to land and get in the game with, more importantly, land some of these prospects that are starting to make people's heads turns, right? Eyebrows raised. And so the involvement in the DMV is something we thought would happen, something that Shane Beamer said would happen, but it is definitely happening. And it's taken, a little bit to get traction on the big time guys up there, but they've done it. Here's a stat for you, Wes. Number of commits from Maryland in the 2024 class, South Carolina 2, Maryland 0 right now. South Carolina fans may like that one, but you look at, who they've landed out of that region, not just Maryland, but, DC, Nicholas Harbor, Tree Babalade in the last class. Look at who they've signed or who they've got committed in this class, and then who they still have a chance at. Dylan Stewart, the number 1 prospect in the country, according to On3, top 10 guy consensus. It's pretty exciting. And, it's not just the DMV region, though. South Carolina's worked themselves into the mix with some big-time blue chippers at a variety of places, whether it's within the state's borders, the DMV, even, heck, you look at 2025 with a guy in Elijah Griffin from Savannah, who's the number 1 prospect in the country now, consensus-wise, who they're right in the game with in a battle with Georgia. So you see the recruiting leveling up. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, so we'll see how this thing goes. I mean, the path is, and we got many more days and hours to talk about this, but the path is this could be, in the end, look at some of the other guys that are in on potentially the best class in school history, I think, potentially both in reality and on paper. So let's dive into them, Chris. I guess we'll start with the order they went public, which is completely jumbled up from the order they went behind the scenes. But so Kelvin Hunter actually jumped in line because if I have it right, and I think we do on this, he was the third commitment to Shane Beamer during this 24-hour stretch, and then was the first to put his up out there. Very cool picture, by the way, of Kelvin on his Twitter. Him decked out in Gamecock gear as like a 6-year-old or something. So, long time coming for him. The RPM was pointing to like 98% for Hunter. I think, Chris, you and I both have, had predictions in there for him. This was no secret. It was more one of those where it's a matter of, when as opposed to if. It seemed like he may wait it out. I got the impression, man, he was taking pictures with all the other commitments on Saturday at the spring game. He's been on campus multiple times during spring practice. He's around all these other guys acting like a commitment. Reading between the lines, it sure seemed like he was just kind of like, there's no point in waiting, at this point. Another in-state guy. They continue to just roll through in-state recruiting. They have the top 4 prospects in the state committed to South Carolina. But we've talked about all that a ton. So let's dive into Kelvin Hunter, the player. I've seen him in an all-star game this past year. I've seen him in a couple of camps. But what do you think of him as a prospect?
Well, I remember Wes hearing about him at West Florence, but then we saw him at camp. What was that? Probably not last summer, but the summer before. I think maybe it was our first look at him, and heard about him and brought pretty good size, but really good speed, for his position. He'd put up some really good testing numbers at that time that I think prompted South Carolina to jump in with an offer. And once that happened, it was, I think South Carolina was pretty instantly the team to beat. But that's the thing that stands out about this kid when you talk to people around that program, when you watch his film, is that he can really run back there. And I think he's got a lot of the traits the defensive backs coach Torian Gray is really, really going to like. Probably has some positional versatility. I think he's listed right as a safety by on 3. That's where he's ranked as. And indeed, I mean, when you look at his size, the skill set, I'll go back to my tried and true phrase. There's a lot to like there about Kelvin Hunter.
Yeah, nice offer list. We saw it kind of explode a little bit. Early on, it was kind of like Carolina and some smaller schools, but then Auburn hopped in, Virginia Tech hopped in. At one point, Chris, it looked like he may kind of go through the process. I still think it would have been difficult for anybody to unseat South Carolina. Took a spring visit to Virginia Tech. I guess that didn't really move the needle too much for him, and just decided there was no point in waiting. So Gamecocks go ahead. It even feels like, I feel like I keep going big picture here, Chris, but just based on some things we've witnessed in the past, it seems like not only has Carolina been able to win their in-state battles with this cycle, but they're not having to battle them out quite as much. And what I mean by that, how many times did we see South Carolina in the past have leads on guys, and they're in-state players and they're big-time players and they're guys that Carolina wants, and they seem to like South Carolina, but it felt like they just had to go through the entire process to get them and go through all the ebbs and the flows and the ups and the downs and sweat it out through official visits to other schools. Not only are these guys committing, but they're kind of just doing it with relatively little drama to it whatsoever as far as this in-state group.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, probably the one they had to sweat out the most would be Blake Franks, who's already committed, just in terms of those ebbs and flows and that battle, the back and forth. And, you remember, Wes, it looked like they were going to get Blake committed back in February, and that kind of got derailed. And then it's, okay, what's the next step? What's going to happen? But they were able to get him in the fold ultimately, right? Some of the other guys, Cam Pringle, Josiah Thompson, they took their time. Kelvin Hunter, they took their time, but their recruitment didn't even last until the summer. We feel like their recruitment lasted a long time because it got started so early with South Carolina, but in reality, there wasn't a lot of drama. There was no shock, no surprise when these guys committed, and you didn't even have to get to official visit season in May and June, or official visit season in the 2023 football season to get all these guys committed. So that helps, Wes, because as we've seen, now they can help you start recruiting. We've certainly seen Cam Pringle been very, very vocal in trying to recruit those other guys who are now committed in the so to speak Great Wall of Carolina, and it helps you. I mean, it's not like the contact's over. The staff just says, "Oh, they're committed, we're good." The relationship continues. They'll still spend time on the road when they're able, going to visit these schools, going to do in-homes at the appropriate time. But it does allow you mentally and from an actual resources standpoint to start devoting a little bit more time to the 2025 class as well, which is very helpful. I mean, you think about the offensive line in particular, Wes, you're just about done there. I mean, you can add another guy if you want, but you got 4 guys there. So now you feel pretty good.
Yeah, you feel great, man. I think you can be very selective about what you do next. And with Hunter, going back to him real quick, like you said, there is position versatility here, listed as a safety. I mean, I kind of see him as one of those guys who actually would have 3 position versatility for me: safety, nickel, or corner. At the very least, Chris, like I think completely conservatively, you're probably saying he can play nickel or safety. Like I think that's kind of a given.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to completely rule out cornerback either. Like I think that's a possibility. I don't know if you completely lock that in, but I do think that's a situation where you could see him kind of get his shot there. I mean, this is kind of we see South Carolina, kind of bring guys in and then figure it out from there. And so I think Hunter is that guy. 4-star. Oh man, I was going to say 4-star across the board. There is one organization that is holding out on the 4-star, but still have him as an industry ranking 4-star, which is the average. It's a weighted average of all the rankings. 194 overall in that ranking, number 17 safety, and again, number 4 prospect in South Carolina. Some differing opinions there, Chris. The average has him as 4th in the state. You have everywhere from 2nd to 7th in the state of South Carolina, which with relatively few guys in the state, that's actually a pretty wide range for him in the state of South Carolina.
Yeah, that is pretty wide range. And one, I think in On3's rankings in state, I believe Bray Staley from Aiken, I believe, is number 4, I want to say. And that may be in the industry rankings, which is the weighted average using those rankings. But, South Carolina, one big point before we go back to Hunter, the guys that they've offered in state, they've landed, and that doesn't happen very often. I think that happened in 2020. Wes, are these the On3? Is this the average?
This is the average, yep. Industry ranking average.
Okay, yep. I was wrong then. I think maybe On3's individual rankings. Yeah, so there you see, Wes said earlier, top 4 commits in the state, and this is the top 4 guys that they wanted in the state. These are the guys that have offers. I think you go back to 2020. It's probably the last time that the guys that South Carolina wanted in the state, it wasn't necessarily just the top 4 guys all around. It's the last time they did it. And that was a really, really good in-state class for them, and it appears to be the case this time. But Hunter, back to him, I just really like the traits here. You can always take a chance, and not that he's a player you're taking a chance on. I think he's a really good take and someone that you want to get in your program, but you feel good about his potential because of those traits, right? He's almost 6 foot. He's 180 pounds. And recalling some of the testing numbers he put up this summer, I think he was, in the 4.4s, hand time in the 40s. So he's got speed as well. And then you look at the film and that kind of backs it up. So again, we've spent a lot of time talking about DMV recruiting, rightfully so. But you start within your own state, and your general rule of thumb is if you got guys in your state that are going to be upgrades and are going to be big additions for your program, you want to sign them. And that's precisely what they're on track to do right now in this class.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, all right, let's start going through these other guys, Chris. So second to go public today, actually within minutes of Hunter, was Big Mike Williams, who, by the way, does not like grits. We do like to add in some food talk on our show. Not a big fan of grits, but that did not hurt the Gamecocks. The reason I bring that up, one of his first visits, they served grits, and just kind of goes to show you, coming from the DMV again, not big on the grits up there. It was his first time ever having grits. I had to ask him, what'd you think? He was not a fan, but he was a fan of everything else at South Carolina. Chris, I got to see Mike a couple times on the sideline at the spring game. This is my first time putting eyes on him. And, geez, dude, like just a massive SEC-looking kid. Eye test-wise, you can see why South Carolina still targeted him. And, we've kind of focused on him as a while. Everybody, of course, was talking rightfully so about Josiah, Cam, Blake Franks. It had started to become really clear, I would say, the last month or so, maybe even longer, at least internally at South Carolina. Maybe some, the rest of the industry didn't really kind of pick up on it yet, but it had become really clear this was the guy who was most likely to be the fourth offensive lineman in this class. And, I like the fact that he's got an SEC-ready body, the fact that, he's listed as a tackle, probably could play either, guard or tackle. I think if you look at Carolina, just contextually, the guys he's coming in with probably ends up being a guard, I would think. But, I mean, they have absolutely added size with these last two classes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you think about basically every single one of the guys in the last two classes, heck, you could go back three, really. If you go back to the Brubaker, Grayson Maines, Case and Henry class, I mean, those guys seem to be progressing nicely. But for this purposes, let's go back just last two, because that's drawn the most attention. I think I'm stealing your phrase where you don't have to imagine what they're going to look like. Heck, there are a lot of, tight end bodies or, 6'6", 250 offensive linemen that end up turning into NFL guys. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's also some ready-made looking guys that are kind of tapped out, right? So you want to find that mix. And in these guys, this four-man offensive line group, they're already there from a physical standpoint. You don't have to worry about, are they going to be able to put on the weight? Are they going to be able to hold the weight? They have the frame. They have the weight. For some of the guys, it's going to be about restructuring, reshaping, getting stronger. But Williams actually, I was talking to his high school coach earlier today, Wes. He's actually lost a good bit of weight, worked really hard to get down to a better weight for his frame. And he does have that combo, guard / tackle mentality and ability. He's a physical guy, but he can move, he can bend, he can be flexible. I tend to agree with you that he's probably going to start off inside as a big, physical offensive guard, but certainly he could slide out and play tackle if you want him to. So another just big man with traits, that you're bringing into this class.
Would you add one more if you're South Carolina, or are you pretty happy? I think we talked about this on the radio show, but I think you just be super selective from here on. I think you're probably focused on, they have such a good start to that 2025 class. That's going to be one of those things, Chris, where I think we go ahead and hit people over the head with it now, so that once they start adding top 4 stars for that class, we can say we told you so. Like, they're already kind of building the foundation with a bunch of those guys, and they're just all like top 300 prospects. Like, it really is pretty insane if you go back and look at the number of 2025 O-line that came through. As good as this class is right now, I don't know if you even rock the boat on some of the 2025s you have a chance with by making this class even bigger. You're almost at the point where you signed so many guys last class and you got 4 big-time guys in this class. Other schools, this is a great sign when other schools start saying, oh, they signed too much talent at a position. You don't want to go there. So I would imagine you go ahead and put your energy to 25 and put your energy to the transfer portal, right? Like we've seen them target and offer a couple of transfer portal guys, easy for me to say, both in the kind of really the non-window when it was just grad transfers and now in this spring window, an offer going out yesterday. So, Chris, I mean, I think you just get super selective if a guy falls and maybe he just says, I want to check out South Carolina, you bring him in. But for the most part, I'd be putting my energy to 25 in the portal.
Yeah, and it could be, Wes, that an additional offensive lineman that we see as part of this class technically, maybe that's a transfer guy. You look back at last class, South Carolina brought in the 4-man high school class. They lost out on Isaiah Jada, who was from junior college at one time committed, because they felt like they probably wanted to take a junior college guy. And then they end up bringing up Nick Gargiulo as a transfer. So I agree with you. They're not going to say we've got to fill out this 5-man class. It doesn't really look like that with the numbers that they took last year, even the year before. Not a big class, right? But it's not like they took one. They took a few guys in that previous class in 2022. So now you can be selective. You can. I don't have any information that South Carolina is going to look junior college. I'm just saying you could look at the transfer route, or if you get some big timer interested, to be really, really hard to turn down. Other than that, you feel good about where you are from a numbers and a talent standpoint.
Yeah, so we'll certainly keep tracking and seeing if anything pops up there, but I think you're really, really happy with that right now. So third commitment as far as the order they went public, I believe he was actually second as far as when they told Shane Beamer. Braden Lee, 4-star DB, true cornerback, it appears, Chris, and a guy that, I remember you and I talking about him way back when South Carolina was hot and heavy on Des Umeozulu and trying to get him. And you sort of say, well, hey, they got this big-time DB there too. Can Carolina make a move with him? It's been very, very quiet for him lately, I feel like, and rightfully so. I didn't realize what all he was going through. He said it on his Instagram. His father passed away actually very recently, so he and his family have been going through a lot. I can understand why the recruiting process was kind of on the back burner. You've not heard from Braden Lee much, but Gamecocks obviously situated themselves in a spot to go land him. He decides not to go through the process any further, go ahead and lock this thing in. And, I mean, I'll be honest, Chris, when I started looking at this class, I kind of had a feel for what different positions, who the main guys were going to be. And I was kind of going, all right, are there a couple of really true lockdown corners that they could potentially add to this class? And I wasn't really sure what direction they were going to go yet. And you go up there at a guy like Braden Lee, another 4-star prospect. I think he's number 28 corner in the country in the On3 industry ranking. And just a really nice looking player.
Yeah, man. Again, talking to Coach Damian Powell up there earlier today, who's now had Desmond Umeozulu, Mike Williams, new Gamecock O-line commit, and Braden Lee. And, the first words out of his mouth are just high IQ. So feels like he's a really, really smart football player, sharp kid. I've had a chance to talk to Braden several times, and you definitely get that sense right off the bat. He's just a really, really sharp kid, and then physically talented as well, right? I mean, he'll get bigger at the college level, but he has some length and size. He's close to 6 foot, if not 6 foot. And then you look at the film, he just makes a lot of plays in man coverage, carries a really nice offer list too. So this is another one that, I think we don't talk about fit enough at times with schools. I think Shane Beamer has made South Carolina kind of a fit program. And what I mean by that is there are certain guys that I think they're really, really going to appeal to on the recruiting trail. And I think Braden Lee, with him and his family, that's one of the the types of kids that he really appeals to. And Braden even told Chad Simmons from On 3, really the first time he went up to South Carolina, that was kind of all he needed to see. It was just that big of a connection. So really likes Beamer, really likes Torian Gray, and they really like him. Early prioritization of Braden Lee. They've been on him for a while, dating back to, when they were recruiting Des Umeozulu for the last class.
And I'll say this, Chris, the sort of prioritization by South Carolina, not just of recruits, but to keep Torian Gray on staff and to give their assistants raises and to take care of those guys. I don't think this is a secret anymore that, remember back, Florida State trying to make a run at Tigray, and that, you never sit there and say a guy is irreplaceable. Like, nobody is irreplaceable, but that would have been disastrous for South Carolina, I think, when you look at the momentum they have. You look at the job that Tigray has done just developing players once he has them. And now recruiting as well. You've kind of seen an uptick in the on the paper ranking of a lot of the guys he's been able to land, the last class and a half or so too. So it's that was a very, very important thing for South Carolina to keep him in the fold. Let's see. Before we get into anything else, Chris, we need to tell everybody about our sponsors. So let's do a little rundown here. First of all, our buddy Clint Hammond, presenting sponsor, as always. Clint actually texted me this morning, Chris, and was like, all right, who the heck did we get? What's going on? Am I just getting caught up, or are we really rolling like this? So Clint is dialed in with Gamecock recruiting, as always, and he can help you get dialed in on the mortgage side if you're in the market for a new home. Go to clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. He is the branch manager right here in Columbia at Movement Mortgage, right over there across from Dreher High School. So give him a call or just drop in on him and say what's up. He will either be hitting up Gamecock Central when you walk in on him or talking to somebody about mortgages. Like, that's the two things that Clint really focuses on in life, I feel like. So give Clint a shout. Also, if you have not done your taxes yet, you absolutely need to call Liberty Tax because you are late. Chris, did you get your taxes done, man?
Taxes are done, man. Taxiety is no more. But if you don't have them done now, today, big time taxiety.
Yeah, call this number, 803-462-5576, 803-462-5576. If your taxes just sucked this year, then give them a call as well. Maybe it's time to have a plan. I may be in this category, actually, guys, where I need to start thinking about my taxes for next year, like right now. So give them a call. Again, 803-462-5576, multiple locations right here in the Columbia area, and they do a fantastic job. And our other sponsor that we tell you about every week, every couple of weeks, is Andy Ledecky from Perfect Franchise. He can help you find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. Contact Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. So I told you all about this a couple of weeks ago. Basically, what Andy does is take people who are looking to franchise and looking to sort of own a business, own a company, and he will match you with an existing franchise as far as, do you want to be a part-time worker manager? Do you want to be a full-time worker manager? Do you want to be sort of an offhand owner who puts an on-campus manager sort of in your place? He will match you with the proper company, a proper franchise that is looking for someone just like you. So 404-973-9901. Just shoot him a text, give him a call. That is a direct line to Andy. So appreciate everybody letting me run through our sponsors there. We jumped right in to everything going on in Gamecock recruiting. So we didn't even spread them out. We just went right into it. But that's the deal. Great sponsors. We appreciate them. I'm still amazed, by the way, with this newest little stream yard setup, how the background, Chris, can just change itself. We've remember the other day when we went out and back in, and all of a sudden we had the baseball field.
Yeah. It's just changing it for us. It's AI probably, right?
Now we have the Gamecock back, which I didn't even know was one of our backgrounds.
We don't have that in our system. I don't think I didn't put it in there. Did you?
No.
I think it's kind of cool. It must be AI. Everything's AI now. In next week's shows, y'all tune in and it'll just be like robot Wes and Chris talking.
Chat GPT.
In our voices, it'll like adopt our voices.
I mean, it exists, right? I mean, Michael here has combined us. Hey, Wes and Mitchell. What has Beamer? Let's see. Let's hit Michael's question. Just give me a hard time, man. What have they done differently to bringing this star-studded class in compared to previous coaching staffs? It's a lot of things, and it's a lot of things that we talk about probably every show when we talk recruiting. Chris, I mean, don't you think it's a combination of just energy, having a plan, on-field success where people can kind of see the momentum on the field building, little luck along the way, and really just the fact that players want to play with other good players. And I feel like kids are always kind of looking for the next big thing. Like, sure, there are going to be some guys that are going to just look at Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, sort of those traditional schools right now, or at least traditional. People might be saying, well, Clemson's not a traditional school. In the eyes of a 17, 16-year-old kid, yes, they are. So some kids just want to look at that, but some kids are looking for the next big cool thing. And Beamer came in and has just, established his own brand, I feel like, is actually the best way to say it. I was going to say culture. Culture gets kind of overused a little bit, I think. He's kind of established his own unique brand with this program. And now another big part, Michael, is that you've got the guys who are committed, who are pitching in with energy, so much time commitment to try to get other guys to join them at South Carolina.
Yeah, and I probably can't add too awful much to what you said there, but point one, let's not forget some of the good players that have been on the roster and some of the recruiting battles that were won in the past. It's not a foreign concept for South Carolina to land some big time recruits, right? There are some still on the roster. There are some going to the NFL this year. There were some recruiting battles that Will Muschamp's staff and Steve Spurrier's staff won that were kind of big time wins, right? As it turns out, for both of those, especially Muschamp, at the end, there weren't enough of those, right? Or there were some just problems or some holes. With Beamer, I definitely go back to what you said, Wes, and that just the brand that he's created with the program. I mean, some coaches or fan bases, roll their eyes at it or whatever, but he made a conscious decision, but it was also a very real decision, and it's who he is to be, out there on social media, and he was going to create buzz about his program and make it a fun place to play, right? 2020 wasn't fun. South Carolina didn't look like a fun place to play, after a COVID year where they won 2 games. And so I think that was a big part of it. But having your own players on your roster and having the commits that you did bring in vouching for you and recruiting for you, that certainly helps. I'd echo beyond that everything else you said. Plus, I do think unlocking some not completely new, but just kind of restructuring how you're recruiting and further unlocking maybe some new areas like the DMV. I think that's also helped them as well.
Well, and Beamer's, I guess, instinct to hire some assistants who, frankly, just like speaking in reality, Chris, weren't a lot of them coming from SEC schools or weren't coming from where they had won a bunch of kind of what we call the big boy recruiting battles. And some of them, like Sterling Lucas, coming from the NFL and not really having that experience recruiting. But I would say there was a little bit of risk there, but he trusted his gut and that he believed the personality, the character, the just kind of ability to connect with people would translate over into recruiting to where the actual experience or lack of experience wouldn't really matter. And, I think we've seen it play out like that. And he's kind of, he even joked, but I don't even know if he was joking about kind of showing Sterling Lucas the ropes the first time he took him on the road recruiting when he first got here. But, the one thing you hear about a lot of these assistants is just that they connect with people. So they maybe didn't come in with the recruiting kind of, oh, that guy was the Rivals Recruiter of the Year back in, 2017, all that stuff. But they just connect with people. They work hard at it. Clayton White was kind of more known as a guy who, was going to build you a defense, but didn't have this reputation as being a great recruiter. He's done a fantastic job, I feel like, of connecting with linebackers and bringing them in. And so it's kind of been an interesting mix in how they built this staff, but it's really worked out. And I think we maybe don't even talk about it enough. Just the secret sauce, I think, is that you have a head coach who is willing to really just work at recruiting and get after it. Not everybody, it's taken for granted because, even for any of his flaws, Muschamp truly got after it in recruiting. So maybe if you're a Carolina fan, you might just kind of think, well, that's just the way it is. But no, Carolina's back-to-back had 2 head coaches who have just gotten after it big time in the actual recruiting process, not just overseeing it, actually being heavily involved.
Yeah, you nailed it. Muschamp heavily involved. He was probably the best recruiter on the South Carolina staff, I think, when he was there. And certainly Beamer has a good track record recruiting as an assistant, very organized, and has done a really good job as the head coach there. I think the structure of how they have things going, has been really helpful. Like you look, the best example is probably offensive line, right? Where they have an amazing way that they recruit on the offensive line with, the recruiting assistants, Sam Serbay, Taylor Edwards, who's the overall director of player personnel, is often heavily involved with those guys. You got Greg Adkins, who's been in a lot of recruiting battles, recruited for a lot of years as an analyst who's involved. And then Lonnie Teasley, who is a younger coach, but has been on the other side and forming relationships when he was an analyst at South Carolina, now in the big chair, so to speak, as the full-time offensive line coach. And he does a really good job from what we've heard of connecting with these prospects too. So, I think there's probably not one singular reason. There's probably, 5, 10, 15 different things that you could point to about how Shane Beamer has structured things. And here's another one. We've probably said this one, Wes. We have said this one, but to restate it differently, I think just Beamer and the way he values relationships and wants to make sure those relationships are valued in recruiting has been important too. It's not about a bunch of hype in recruiting. It's not about going down a list of the highest rated guy and feeding him a bunch of lines and trying to convince him to come to your program. He wants things to be more real, authentic, and relationship driven. And I think that's, again, we talked about this earlier. You look at the 2024 class. Why has it come together like this? Relationships, a lot of long-standing relationships that his staff has built with prospects. So I think that's one big thing that you could point to where maybe it's not totally different, right? But he's done so well at it and cultivating those relationships and recruiting. I think it's a big reason for the success.
Yeah, man. So we'll recap the numbers real quick. 10 commitments at this point. You'd still, I would think, expect a full class. So still a ways to go, obviously. But as everybody kind of knows at this point, a bunch of other big-time prospects that they're after. And who knows, what will this momentum do in terms of getting maybe a guy we're not even talking about involved, kind of are interested with South Carolina too. But 10 commitments, 8 who are 4-star prospects. That's 80% on the blue chip ratio, which I think is pretty dang good. definitely way up there in the best ratio South Carolina has ever had. Let's see, maybe a couple other questions here, Chris, and we got to get out of here, man. Let's see. Big Red saying, can we as fans translate these high-level recruits to high win totals in the future? I don't know if the fans want to do that, they can give to NIL would be the best way that fans can directly help contribute, I think. I mean, is that fair, Chris?
Yeah, that's probably a fair assumption. I mean, look, at the end of the day, like the 2024 class, even the 2023 class that was signed, we'll know in a few years how that's panning out, right? But the trajectory is definitely good. You would definitely want to be sitting in the top 5 nationally recruiting as opposed to the top 50. If you're sitting at number 49, like, oh, that was another Maryland tweet by me, sitting at number 49 right now. That you want to be there, right? That doesn't automatically mean you're winning. But if you look, Wes, if you're a program that's able to stack top 5, top 10 type classes, you're going to be pretty good unless something goes haywire. And I think maybe the exciting thing for South Carolina fans should be that they're stacking these classes, but they also have a good team culture. We've seen some programs that have had a highly ranked recruiting class 2 or 3, but that things are kind of falling apart internally a little bit, and that's not the case at South Carolina. So more talent you acquire, the better of a chance you have to compete.
No doubt, man. I just changed the background to baseball because there's a big baseball series this weekend. We won't get into it on this show, but I'm sure Colin Taylor will have you completely covered. Thursday, Friday, Saturday matchup, South Carolina baseball versus Florida. Chris and I will be on 107.5 throughout the week as well. Our normal GC Takeover Hour at 11. We actually have a full 9 to noon show on Friday, live from the Camden Firehouse Subs. Come out and say what's up. Otherwise, that'll do it for right now. But if any other breaking news happens, we'll of course hop on and try to talk some ball and get you called up. And basically, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page as well, youtube.com/GamecockCentral. We try to have breaking news and breakdowns of big South Carolina happenings on there as well. So, all right, y'all, we're going to get out of here. He's Chris. I'm Wes. Y'all have a good one.